Did you know the common myth most Americans grow up hearing is that Thanksgiving began in 1621, when friendly Pilgrims and Wampanoag Native Americans came together to share a peaceful harvest meal at Plymouth Colony? The story we all know emphasizes unity, gratitude, and the founding of a new nation. But the actual historical context? It's far more complex, involving colonization, violence, disease, and the sheer will to survive. Let's peel back the layers of this story, shall we? Before the Mayflower even set sail, the land we now call New England was far from empty. For thousands of years, it was home to thriving native nations, including the Wampanoag, Nauset, and Nipmuc. The specific area where the Pilgrims landed was called Patuxet by the local Wampanoag people. But just a few years before their arrival, between 1616 and 1619, a devastating epidemic, most likely brought by European traders, swept through the coastal region. It was catastrophic, wiping out an estimated 75 to 90% of the native population. Entire villages were left silent and empty, including Patuxet, the very ground the Pilgrims would later settle on. This wasn't an empty wilderness. It was a land hollowed out by tragedy. So, when the Pilgrims, a group of English separatists seeking religious freedom, finally landed in December 1620, they were in serious trouble. They arrived late in the year, totally unprepared for the harsh New England winter, and lacked enough food or proper shelter. The result was brutal. Half of them died during that first winter. Their dream of a new life was on the verge of becoming a mass grave. Without help, the Plymouth colony was doomed. Then, in the spring of 1621, a pivotal figure entered their story, a native man named Tisquantum, whom we know as Squanto. His own life story is incredible. He was a member of the Patuxet tribe, the people who had lived right there, but he'd been kidnapped years earlier by Englishmen, enslaved in Spain, and had somehow managed to escape and find his way back home, only to find his entire village gone. Despite this unimaginable trauma, Squanto served as a translator and a guide for the struggling colonists. He taught them how to plant corn in the local soil, where to fish, and how to survive in this new environment. It's no exaggeration to say that without Squanto, the Plymouth colony would likely have failed completely. This brings us to the famous feast in the autumn of 1621. After their first successful harvest, thanks in large part to Squanto's guidance, the Pilgrims did hold a 3-day celebration. About 90 Wampanoag men, led by their chief, Massasoit, also attended. But why? The most likely reason is that they heard gunfire, the Pilgrims celebrating with their muskets, and came to investigate, possibly to ensure everything was peaceful or to respond to a potential threat. So yes, there was food, and there was diplomacy. But this wasn't a potluck between new best friends. It wasn't called Thanksgiving, and it certainly wasn't the beginning of a national holiday. It was, for all intents and purposes, a political meeting. It represented a temporary, fragile alliance between two very different groups who desperately needed each other for mutual survival. The Wampanoag had been weakened by the epidemic and saw a potential ally in the English against rival tribes. The Pilgrims, of course, needed the Wampanoag's knowledge just to stay alive. It was a strategic partnership born of necessity, not a simple, happy meal. So what happened to that fragile peace? Well, it didn't last. Within a single generation, the alliance completely broke down. More and more English settlers arrived, hungry for land. They pushed further and further into native territories, and tensions inevitably boiled over into conflict. This led to brutal wars, like the Pequot War in 1636. During that war, colonial forces carried out the infamous Pequot Massacre, where they surrounded a Pequot village at night and set it on fire, killing hundreds of men, women, and children. After this massacre, the governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony, John Winthrop, declared a day of Thanksgiving. But this wasn't a day for sharing a harvest. It was to celebrate a military victory and the slaughter of the Pequot people. This event, a religious ceremony giving thanks for victory in a brutal war, was one of the first official events to be called a Thanksgiving by the colonists. It's a far cry from the peaceful, unified image we're often sold. This darker history is a crucial part of the story. So how did we get from a day celebrating a massacre to a day of turkey and football? The modern holiday we celebrate today was largely an invention of the 19th century. A very influential writer named Sarah Josepha Hale, who also wrote Mary Had a Little Lamb, campaigned for decades to make Thanksgiving a national holiday. She saw it as a way to promote unity and wholesome family values. Then, in 1863, right in the middle of the American Civil War, President Abraham Lincoln officially proclaimed a national Thanksgiving Day. His goal was to help heal a deeply divided nation. To do that, he and others purposefully drew on the romanticized, mythical version of the 1621 feast, the story of Pilgrims and Native Americans dining together in peace. This carefully crafted narrative served a political purpose, to create a unifying origin story for the country, one that conveniently glossed over the centuries of conflict, violence, and land seizure that had actually taken place. The myth wasn't an accident. It was constructed. Understanding this full history changes how we see the holiday. For many Native Americans, Thanksgiving is not a day of celebration. It is observed as a national day of mourning. Since 1970, the United American Indians of New England have gathered every year on Thanksgiving Day at Coles Hill, overlooking Plymouth Rock in Massachusetts, to remember the genocide of their ancestors, the theft of their lands, and the relentless assault on their culture. It's a solemn day to honor their resilience and to protest the racism and oppression they continue to face. For them, the myth of a happy Thanksgiving whitewashes a history of profound loss and injustice. So, what does this all mean for us today? It doesn't necessarily mean you have to cancel your family dinner. For many, Thanksgiving is a cherished time to be with loved ones, express gratitude, and reflect on the good things in life. And that's valuable. But it can, and should, be a day where we hold two ideas at once. We can be grateful for our families and our blessings, while also acknowledging the full, painful history behind the holiday. It's an opportunity to educate ourselves and others, to move beyond the simple myth and towards a more honest understanding of our shared past. By facing the complexities, we can make the day one of genuine reflection, not just for a harvest, but for the history that shaped the very ground beneath our feet. Thank you so much for watching and for being open to learning more about this complex piece of history. If you found this video insightful, please give it a like and consider subscribing for more deep dives into the stories that shape our world. See you next time.